This will probably save you a lot of time, money and frustration. This enclosure almost perfectly fits its purpose. Oh crap. Over the years I have built many DIY tarantula enclosures and tried many things. Some worked, some absolutely did not. So in this video I want to show you what I built, what failed and what I would do differently today. You don't have to make the same mistakes. What I'm showing you here is not the best way to build enclosures. It's just the way that I did it. It's what I tried, what survived long-term use and what I learned by actually keeping animals in them. If you are thinking about building your own tarantula enclosures, especially as a new keeper, this will probably save you a lot of time, money and frustration. I started building my own enclosure because of several reasons. First, cost. Buying enclosures, especially from brands, adds up over time. And some enclosure layouts, for instance for arboreal tarantulas, did not match my expectations, and if they met my expectations, they were disproportionately expensive. Second, enclosure layout. Many enclosures just didn't have the layout I wanted in terms of dimensions, door mechanism, ventilation placement, or the vents were in the wrong place. Third, experimentation. I wanted to try different materials, layouts and ventilation styles and see what is possible in a non-professional setting. And finally, I wanted to have enclosures that fit my shelf and not fit my shelf to the enclosures. Over time, I experimented with a lot of materials and a lot of different tools. I converted aquariums, I built enclosures from wood, polycarbonate, acrylic and glass. And I used a lot of 3D printed parts. One of my first glass enclosures that I built is this arboreal enclosure where clearly my Iberpor diversipes is housed. I built this from a 20 x 20 x 30 centimeters aquarium tank and also had a few spare glass panels laying around. My idea was to focus this enclosure totally around cross ventilation. And I have placed the horizontal cork part directly next to the ventilation. In the front I added a glass pane like this. The door was fixed with two 3D printed hinges. And I joined those hinges with aquarium silicone to the glass door. The closing mechanism is magnet based. I used two neodymium iron boron magnets and I designed a special holder for those magnets that simultaneously acts as a doorknob. Structurally and in terms of ventilation, this enclosure works absolutely fine. It's just that after I've built it, I realized that I've blocked myself off from the upper part of the enclosure just by putting that glass pane here. And if I wanted to rehouse this tarantula, I would have no chance of getting it out without removing this glass pane. So if I built this today, I would definitely think about how rehousing would work with the enclosure. But overall, I'm pretty satisfied. One of my first enclosures made from polycarbonate was this one. I used 3mm thick panes and I really experimented with ventilation here. As you can see, I've added ventilation on the sides, at the back and at the top. This time I fixed the door with some store-bought steel hinges. Again, the closing mechanism is magnet powered. Anyway, this broke after some time. I originally designed that so that I could also take off part of the top. For that I added some 3D printed sliding elements. Honestly, it worked quite well. And here, for instance, I would have an easy time rehousing any tarantula. But this enclosure has been empty for quite some time now, and it looks the parts of it, honestly, as I had it stored outside. My conclusion for this design is works, but it's a little bit flimsy. But that's my fault for not using thicker polycarbonate chains. After that, I built another polycarbonate enclosure. This time a 30 by 30 by 30 centimeter cube, and I designed this specifically for burrowing tarantulas. It is top opening, again with the same sliding mechanism as with the smaller enclosure, and it has ventilation holes on 3 sides and one side without ventilation holes. And this side is supposed to go to the back of the wall. It's honestly quite simple, but there are a few mistakes that I made. The first and also the worst mistake is that I didn't design it properly. That means that I had the side panes and the bottom pane overlap in the wrong direction. And every time I picked it up with the weight of the moist soil in it, I felt that I pressed the bottom pane inside a little bit. That's why I added a lot of extra stuff and extra reinforcement. Also, I used normal super glue. That was quite a mess. The super glue did run out along the seam of the joints and it looked just ugly. So I put some aluminum tape over there to cover it up and make it look a little bit nicer at least. But next time I will do this, I will use 6mm thick polycarbonate paints to improve rigidity and use a dedicated polycarbonate glue. And finally, this is the heaviest hitters of them all. This is a custom wood enclosure that I built specifically so that it can fit perfectly into one of my shells. Here you see that there's currently my Tarantula apophysis housed in there, and that's also one reason why it is large. She's not fully grown yet. She's already a really large tarantula. And when she is fully grown, this enclosure size will be perfect. I built this wooden frame that I fixed with screws. I drilled holes in the side, added my 3D printed ventilation. I added a glass pane on top. I've added sliding elements. And I added ventilation in the back. The wood itself is phenolic coated plywood. I chose this because it's waterproof and easy to work with. Overall, I'm very happy how this turned out. Just one simple thing that I would do differently this time, that I would use aquarium silicone to seal the insides of the seams that join the wood paints together, because sometimes when I water it a little bit too much, small amounts of water leak out. Finally, let's draw some conclusions and lessons that I learned. Some of my builds didn't withstand long-term use. They fell apart, leaked, or there were other minor things that made me rethink my decisions and rehouse my tarantulas to a store-bought enclosure. One thing that I found was that polycarbonate works much better than acrylic, especially for humid enclosures, simply because acrylic glass warps when it absorbs humidity, at least the grades that I had available, and polycarbonate just isn't as susceptible to this. The second thing that I learned is that you really have to think things through completely before you build yourself an enclosure. How you access the watering dish, how you feed your tarantula, and how you are going to rehouse really should be considered before you build the enclosure. And I learned that the hard way with one of my own enclosures. Sometimes a design looks really great until you realize rehousing will be a nightmare because you can't access certain parts of the enclosure. Third and final lesson learned is that DIY is only cheaper if you don't fail. I wasted many glass panels until I learned how to properly cut glass. I learned a thing or two, but in the end it wasn't as cheap as buying from the store. Overall, I don't regret building my own enclosures because it taught me a little bit of enclosure design, ventilation, few handiwork skills, and I had a fun time doing it. Even if it wasn't the greatest looking enclosure, I know I did it myself, and that's something to be proud of. If you want to make one DIY, then start simple. Plan everything out first. Use the right materials and accept that your first builds won't be perfect, because that's the only way you're going to get better. If you found this useful, feel free to subscribe. And if you have built your own enclosures, tell me what your experience was with that and which challenges you faced. Keep it simple, stay curious, and let your spiders be spiders.